Well, Graham Ike and Braden Huff absolutely torched Lewis Clark State in Gonzaga's exhibition win on Friday evening. What we learned about this team and some projections for Mark Few's lineup and rotation this season, all coming up on today's Locked On Zags podcast.
You are Locked On Zags, your daily podcast on the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What is going on, y'all? Welcome to the Locked On Zags podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host and longtime Gonzaga podcaster, Andy Patton, here to bring you news and updates on all things Zag athletics. Today's episode of Locked On Zags is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster, and they do it for free. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. Folks, happy start of the college basketball season. Today is November 6th, and it is the first day of this season. Of course, Gonzaga will not play their first regular season game until Friday, but we still got some exciting games today. I will be at the Portland Long Beach State game at the Chiles Center for anybody looking to watch some WCC basketball to start off the season. Come say hi if you see me there. Today is a kind of hybrid Mailbag Monday episode. We're going to recap the exhibition game from Friday night against Lewis Clark State, talk about the good and the bad that we saw in that contest. Second segment, we'll answer a handful of mailbag questions, all talking about the lineup, minutes, projections. We're going to give you a projection for every player on the roster, how many minutes per game we think they're going to play and what has changed after that Lewis Clark State game. And then we'll close out the show with a variety of other mailbag questions as well. Jam-packed episode. Let's get us right into it. For those who missed the exhibition game on Friday, Gonzaga walloped Lewis Clark State 96-58 was the final score there. Zags went up on a 10-0 run to start the game. Ended up letting Lewis Clark State all the way back in. I think it was 24-22 at one point. Gonzaga went on another big 10-0 run. From that point forward, it was smooth sailing, kind of what you would expect against an exhibition opponent like this. Not terribly different from Lewis Clark State's exhibition game against Arizona as well. Again, we'll start with the good, Graham Ike. That's where we start this conversation. Graham Ike was absolutely phenomenal in this exhibition game. 24 points and 7 rebounds, 11 of 13 shooting from the field, 2 of 2 from the free throw line. He did not look like there was a foot injury bothering him whatsoever. He looked agile. He looked healthy. He had a variety of post moves. His ability to get position, find position, establish it, keep it, fight through contact, up and unders, variety of different post moves. He looked absolutely excellent. He looked good defensively as well. He hedged screens very well, something we will need to see from Gonzaga's bigs. It hasn't always been a strength of this team in the last couple of years, and certainly Ike, I think, can help in that area for Gonzaga. And it led to a question here that I'm going to read. This is the first mailbag question as we kind of go through, like I said, a hybrid episode. This came from Pete on Discord. Again, if you want to ask mailbag questions, join our Discord channel. Over 200 people in there right now. You can click the link in the show notes and get there. Pete says, Graham Ike was able to score effortlessly against Lewis Clark State's undersized defenders. Given his interior game of leverage and bump and shoot, is he likely to have the same amount of success against defenders who are taller and bulkier like Zach Edey and Donovan Clingan? Well, if the question is, will Graham Ike shoot 11 of 13 from the field against Zach Edey or Donovan Clingan? No. Will he have the same level of success as he did against the 6'8" defenders at Lewis and Clark State? No, he's not going to. This was a great performance, and I don't want to pour cold water on it, but it is very important to acknowledge the competition level here. Extremely important. Having said that, yes, Graham Ike's variety of different moves on the block, the way that he functions, I mean, there's a reason he averaged 19.5 points per game in a very physical Mountain West conference. The optimism around Graham Ike right now should be very high, but it does not mean that he is going to dominate Zach Edey or Donovan Clingan. It does not mean he is going to dominate even some of the bigs in the WCC. He's probably not going to just dominate Mitchell Saxon at St. Mary's. The expectations shouldn't be that high for Graham Ike or Braden Huff, and we'll get to some of that stuff later in the show, but that does not mean we should not be very excited about Ike doing exactly what he should have done, if not more, against the caliber of opponent that Gonzaga played on Friday. Other good things we saw from this team: Ryan Nembhard only had 5 points, but 10 assists and 7 rebounds. He gets up and down that floor like lightning fast. Great decision maker with the basketball. Navigated pick and rolls really, really well. Found open guys around the basket. Hit backdoor cutters. Just looked exactly like what you want an experienced, polished point guard to look like. And then the freshman off the bench. I think this is the big story outside of Graham Ike, is how Braden Huff looked, how Dusty Stromer looked, how Luka Krajinovic looked. Those guys were all phenomenal. And we will talk more about them as we get kind of further into this episode. But Braden Huff in particular, 21 points and 9 rebounds. He had 3 blocks, 8 of 11 from the field, 4 of 4 from the free throw line. 1 of 4 from deep. That was kind of the only area he didn't really contribute, but those were all his misses. Every shot inside the 3-point line, he knocked it down. Again, without trying to be the cold water guy, most of Huff's damage came late in the second half. So not only against an exhibition opponent like Lewis Clark State, probably against their backups. This, again, not trying to trash Lewis Clark State in any capacity, but the competition level that Braden Huff was primarily playing against in this exhibition game is probably not much better than the competition he played in high school. So you got to take some of these results with a bit of a grain of salt. We have yet to see Braden Huff do anything against Division I caliber opponents that are not his teammates. That's not a knock on him. It's just a fact. We just haven't seen it yet. Doesn't mean he's not capable of it. Just means we need to see a little bit more of that. But again, hard not to like what we saw from him in this game, not just from a results perspective, but his movement, his ability to find positioning on the block, his activity on defense was phenomenal. He blocked a handful of shots. He looks like he could be a rim protector again. We'll want to see that against higher level competition, but really nice showing from him. Really, really nice. Dusty Stromer as well, 8.6 boards, 2 assists, 3 of 5 from the field, just kind of did a little bit of everything. Very active player on both offense and defense, knocked the ball loose a lot of times, really just constantly moving around, got a nice floater game, makes good decisions with the basketball, 4 offensive rebounds. Love the tenacity and energy we saw from him. Krajinovic had 7 assists in this game in 19 minutes, many of them to Braden Huff. The 2-man game between Luka and Braden was phenomenal. Again, coming towards the end of that scrimmage, but those two guys as a future 2-man game for Gonzaga, lots to like about what could happen with those two guys in the future. Not sure that there'll be a ton of opportunities for them to do so this year, but again, we'll get to that momentarily. Another great thing we saw from this game, 15 of 18 from the free throw line. Big area of concern for this team last year. Phenomenal to see them shoot well there in this game on Friday. Now, how about the bad stuff? We won't spend a lot of time on this because none of it is all that concerning. Anton Watson just had a game he'd like to forget. 1 of 7 from the field. He did have 8 points, 8 boards, in part because he went 6 of 8 from the free throw line. He looked great defensively, made 75% of his free throws. I'm not worried about him missing a few other shots. Steele Venters hasn't really showed up yet, and I know people are concerned about that. A lot of people asking if Dusty will start over him, if Steele's going to come off the bench. I think that judging Steele off an exhibition game is a little too premature, but it's reasonable to look at how he performed and have some concerns. We need to see more from him. There's no debate about that. I think that we will, but he is in more of a precarious position than any other kind of veteran starter type player for this team. He had a nice backdoor cut for a dunk. That's the only shot he made. He missed another dunk. He missed both his 3-point attempts. Doesn't handle pressure very well. There's some areas of Steele's game that probably need to be improved in order for him to secure a significant role, but not something that I'm overly alarmed about just yet. Ben Gregg didn't look great defensively. That was kind of an eye test note that I made. Seemed to rotate late a few times, committed some fouls on guys that he should have already been in position. Not a huge deal, but the way that Braden Huff's been playing, Ben Gregg that third big role is not guaranteed to him, and he's going to have to earn it. And getting a little lost on defense is not an area that it's not something he's going to be able to get away with throughout the season, especially if Huff keeps playing well. And then Jun Sak-Yo, he's just still a project, and that's okay. That's okay. 0-4 from the field, airballed his 1 3-point attempt. He didn't look completely lost or anything. He just isn't quite ready. He's just not quite ready. I think he's going to be out of the rotation. I think he's the 10th man. We'll talk more about that momentarily, but I think that that's fine for him developmentally to take another year to kind of get some exposure to some minutes, but not quite all the way in. And then we'll see kind of what he looks like the following year as well. And then the last area for Gonzaga, 5 of 21 from deep. Not something I'm super concerned about going forward, but 5 of 21 from deep against even some of the better WCC teams could cause some problems for the Zags. So that's an area they'll need to improve, obviously. We got plenty more mailbag questions to get to, including a lot of discussion about Dusty Stromer's role next year, which is why Dusty Stromer becomes our game changer of the week, as brought to you by the Athletic Brewing Company. Because much like Stromer over the weekend, Athletic Brewing Company completely changed the non-alcoholic beer game. They make non-alcoholic beers that actually taste good. And speaking of good, Stromer's energy off the bench, his ability to attack the basket, his decision-making with the ball, it all shined in a big way at the McCarthy Athletic Center on Friday evening. Folks, once again, Athletic Brewing Company has completely changed the non-alcoholic beer game. They make non-alcoholic beers that actually taste good. They are full of flavor and well-crafted, just like a full-strength beer. You can find Athletic Brewing Company's non-alcoholic brews at a store near you, or you can buy them online at athleticbrewing.com. First-time customers can use promo code LOCKEDON to get 15% off their first online order. That's promo code LOCKEDON at checkout for 15% off at athleticbrewing.com. Exclusions and conditions apply. Athletic Brewing Company, fit for all times. All right, folks, thank you so much for making Locked On Zags your first listen or your first watch of the day. Give a shout out to those everyday listeners checking out the show on YouTube. Shout out to those of you on the Discord channel. We had so much fun in our game thread on Friday. If you guys want to be a part of that, click the link in the show notes. You can join our Discord channel. It is free. And on Friday against Yale, we will be talking all game long. Fantastic way to get involved in that Gonzaga community. Well, it's Mailbag Monday. We're going to roll on here. This question comes from Zagarola on Discord, who says, did the exhibition game give you any insight regarding the probable rotation and distribution of minutes? The Butcher MD on Twitter asked about Dusty Stromer starting over Steele Venters. John via Gmail asked about Braden Huff potentially starting. Pete on Discord, Christian via Gmail, and Jeff via Gmail all asked about playing the bigs together. So we're going to do a full starters and bench player breakdown minutes, where I think they're going to play. We're going to hammer through that right here, discuss what's different from my previous predictions, and then we'll get into the rest of those mailbag questions. So the starters for me have not changed. The starting lineup that I projected before the exhibition game ended up being the starting lineup that we saw in that exhibition game. Ryan Nembhard, Nolan Hickman, Steele Venters, Anton Watson, and Graham Ike. And I expect Nembhard to play 34-ish minutes per game. He's the starting point guard. He's playing every minute at the point guard position. Nolan Hickman, I got about 28 minutes per game. Most of them are going to come at shooting guard. I do think he's going to play the backup point guard minutes when Ryan Nembhard is not on the floor. Steele Venters, I have playing about 27 minutes per game, and his playing time is the most tenuous. I don't think there's any debate about the 5 players in the starting lineup who is most likely to lose that spot in the starting lineup. Right now, it is Steele Venters. I think his floor spacing and the fact that he doesn't need the ball in his hands makes him a valuable player to start alongside Ryan Nembhard, alongside Graham Ike. I think he fits the starting lineup well, but you could say a lot of those same things about Dusty. Dusty doesn't space the floor the way that Steele does, and I think that that gives Steele the advantage. Whether you think that Dusty's a better player or not, there's a very, very strong argument that Dusty is better right now than Steele Venters. I think that's a fair argument. I'm not sure I agree, but I think it's fair. But I don't think it matters in the sense that I think Steele fits the starting lineup better, and Dusty's energy and enthusiasm and kind of change of pace makes more sense coming off the bench. So me saying I think Steele should start over Dusty is not an indication that I think Dusty's not ready or that he's not even better necessarily. It's just more of I think the fit makes more sense in that regard. Watson's going to start at the 4. I got him playing about 30 minutes a night. Ike, I got about 25 minutes per game. I think that'll come up as his conditioning gets a little bit better. He did show some signs of being a little winded in that exhibition game. Again, if you're looking for something, it's easier to see. So I don't know exactly how he was feeling in that moment, but I think as the season goes on, we'll probably see some more 30-minute games from him. But if he gets in foul trouble, the Zags have enough depth in the front court that they don't need to play him 30-plus minutes every single game. And so I don't think that they will. One thing I've switched is instead of having Ben Grevitt be the 6th man in terms of minutes coming off the bench, I moved that up to Stromer. I think Stromer is going to be the most minutes of any non-starter on this Gonzaga team. I think are going to go to Dusty. I have him right now at about 16 minutes per game, most of those coming at the small forward position, with a handful of them potentially coming at that 2-guard spot as well. And I think he's really going to challenge Venters for minutes at the 3. Again, Steele may start, but it wouldn't shock me if there are games, multiple games, where Stromer ends up playing more minutes than Venters. That would not surprise me. That might happen early in the season. To be perfectly honest, it might happen early in the season. But I still think that Steele's going to start, and I just think that Dusty might play more minutes, being a 2-3. I don't think he plays any 4, but maybe even some 1 potentially in there as well. Ben Gregg is the 7th man. Braden Huff is the 8th man. I have both those guys playing about 13 minutes per game. I think Ben's going to play majority of the backup minutes at the 4 behind Anton Watson. I think Braden Huff's going to play the majority of the backup 5 minutes. This is going to be the first time in a while we've seen a 4 big lineup for Gonzaga, back to 2016-17, when the Zags had Shemek Karnowski, Jonathan Williams as the starting centers. They had Zach Collins as the backup, and then Killian Tilly played a solid role off the bench as the 4th big. This is the first time since then that they're going to have that 4 big lineup, but it's really hard to imagine any situation where all 4 of those guys aren't playing on a nightly basis. I think Braden Huff primarily plays in place of Graham Ike. One of the questions I got was about Ike and Huff playing together. I think it could happen. I think that the skill set could match, especially if Braden's 3-point shooting kind of starts to become more consistent, which I think that it will. But I don't see a lot of situations where both Watson and Gregg are on the bench. So I think while I think they could play together, I suspect they won't all that much, if that makes sense. 9th man for me is Luka Krajinovic. 10th is Jun Sakyo. Both guys I have playing a few minutes per game, kind of the 6-7 minutes, mostly in garbage time type role. Krajinovic looked outstanding in that exhibition game. I think he's a 3rd-string shooting guard and the 3rd-string point guard behind Nembhard and Hickman. I think he'll play more in blowouts. I think he won't play at all in close games. And that's more or less what I feel about Yo as well. Yo did not you can tell that there's still some work to be done. Krajinovic looks more ready to contribute to this team than Yo. But I think both are going to get minutes, especially in those blowout games. And then I think Pavel Stosic is probably redshirting, and then it's the walk-ons. So that's kind of where I'm at with this lineup and rotation right now. We'll obviously get a much clearer picture of that on Friday when the Zags take on Yale. This next question here comes from Ted_Z117 on Discord, who says, Gonzaga's clearly lost a lot this offseason. However, I'm interested in the ways that Gonzaga might be better this year. Yeah, the number one reason, or the number one way that Gonzaga is going to be better this year is they're going to handle pressure in the backcourt better. This was a huge area of concern for Gonzaga last year. Early in the season, Drew Timme was basically the point guard. That was not the plan. That was not what Gonzaga wanted to do. But in that Texas game and in that Michigan State game and even Purdue and some other early games, Gonzaga couldn't get the ball to Drew Timme. Nobody on the team could handle the pressure from opposing guards. Anton Watson was the one making entry passes, and then when that dried up, it was just Drew himself. That does not going to work for this Gonzaga roster. Graham Ike isn't capable, or is unlikely to be capable of handling the role that Drew Timme handled as the kind of guy you get the ball at the top of the key and you facilitate everything through him. That's not Graham Ike's strength. It wasn't Drew Timme's full strength either, but he was capable of doing it, which is what got Gonzaga into the Elite Eight last year. But this year's team has Ryan Nembhard. They have Nolan Hickman taking on a different role where he doesn't have to do that as much. And I think that is going to make Gonzaga better. They're going to be better because they can handle pressure. They can get up and down the floor at a tempo that they couldn't really do last year. Is this team overall better? It's too early to tell. It's really hard to replace Drew Timme, Julian Strother, Rasir Bolton, Malachi Smith. Really hard. Replacing a lot of those guys with freshmen. Talented freshmen, but we haven't seen enough to know if they can fully replicate that amount of production. But Gonzaga will be better at handling pressure from opposing teams. They will also be more balanced offensively, which you could argue is good and bad. They don't necessarily have a go-to scorer. I think Graham Ike could emerge as that player, but we need to see him be that role yet. So it's still too early to know exactly if the team overall is better, but there are areas where they will likely be better. This question here comes from Zagdad13 on Discord, who says, with Drew Timme setting the all-time Zag scoring record, is there a chance any records will ever be broken, especially in the current transfer portal era? Well, Drew said it in the transfer portal era, so I don't think we can assume that records cannot be broken in this era. Drew Timme also did it in 4 years. A lot of people will say, oh, well, it's easy to break records when you have COVID eligibility. Sure, Drew didn't use it. So, Anton Watson's going to move into second place all-time in Gonzaga basketball history in steals. And, yeah, he's going to need the COVID year to get there. But after that, I think that we could still see records get broken. It took 50 years for Drew Timme to break Frank Burgess's record, more than 50 years. So I think assuming it's going to happen anytime soon, probably not. I don't know if that record will ever be broken. And I do think that overall longevity records are probably more in danger because of players not sticking around as long, but players have been able to leave. I mean, Adam Morrison left after 3 years. That was 15 years ago. Like, it can happen. So I don't think that the transfer portal era is going to like the good players who come to Gonzaga probably aren't going to leave. So I don't think it's going to impact those records all that much. But having said that, a lot of those records are going to be tough to break. Final question here before we get into the last segment of the show comes from Jeff via Gmail. Jeff says, is Gonzaga's non-con schedule really all that unique, or could it just be that Gonzaga's non-conference schedule is the way it is because that's how blue blood programs like Duke and Kansas schedule games? Yeah, he was responding to an episode I did a couple weeks ago talking about the uniqueness of Gonzaga's non-conference schedule, and I stand by it. It is still unique. Kentucky's not scheduling this way. Kansas has mid-level teams on their schedule. They have Yale, similar to Gonzaga. They also have Mizzou. They have Wichita State. Kentucky has a whole bunch of teams in the KenPom 100 to 200 range. They have New Mexico State. It's their season opener today. Like, they got a lot of games kind of in that mid-range. There are very few teams that schedule where the way that Gonzaga did this year of like all top 50 teams or top 30 teams or all like bottom 200 teams or bottom 100 teams. That's rare. And I've said it was unique at the time, and I stand by it. I think it's still I don't think it's necessarily bad, and I think it's a product of Gonzaga having to schedule this way because they don't have the benefit of a bunch of quad one opportunities in conference play, so they stack up with those kind of games in the non-con. But I still find the way Gonzaga schedules amongst other college basketball teams, even the Blue Bloods, is pretty unique. We've got some NBA talk and a look at some of Gonzaga's most unheralded transfers of all time, all coming up after a word from today's sponsor, LinkedIn Jobs. Folks, these days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business, and you want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best and most qualified candidates available. And that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs, which helps find the right people for your team faster, and they do it for free. It's honestly super easy to create a free job post. And then you just add your job in the purple hashtag hiring frame to your profile to make it easy for candidates to see your hiring positions. From there, simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates who have just the right skills and experience so that you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and ultimately hire. And that's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus those leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster. So post your job for free now at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, folks, closing out today's show with more mailbag questions. This one here comes from Shelly Rito 7 on our Discord channel. They say, who are some players that would have thrived in today's game? Players who may have been role players or great Zags that could have been even greater. Yeah, a couple guys kind of come to mind here. One of them that I think about a lot is Elias Harris. Elias Harris, of course, started Gonzaga from 2009 to 2013, 4-year guy, never really got that look in the NBA. But here's the thing. As a freshman, Elias Harris shot 45% from three. He was a 6'8" power forward, a dunking machine who shot 45% from three on 1.5 attempts per game. In today's era, there is just no way that he would only take 1.5 threes a game if he was knocking them down at a 45% clip. Many people felt that Elias should have left after his freshman year. If this happened this year and you shot 45% from three as a 6'8" forward, there's no way you would still be in college. Elias shot 35% as a sophomore on also 1.5 attempts per game. Junior year, he was about 41.5% on 2 attempts per game, and then it plummeted as a senior, unfortunately for him. But a guy who had skills that matched the modern NBA. I mean, he wasn't there that long. It was only a decade ago. Maybe I'm trying to make myself feel better since I was at Gonzaga the same 4 years as Elias, but I think that his skills even more matched the modern NBA than they did even a decade ago, and I think he never quite got that shake. Similar to Casey Calvary, somewhat similar. 4-year career, he shot 41% from three, but it was on 1.5 attempts per game. What would that have looked like if he took more threes? Would he have gotten a better look in the NBA? Probably. Austin Day's another one. He's a shot blocker, a rim runner, 42.2% from three. He obviously was selected in the lottery, so he was clearly valued by NBA scouts at the time, but I do wonder what that might have looked like in a more modern setting. Next question here comes from Jeff via Gmail. Jeff says, WCC teams provided some very encouraging exhibition results, including Gonzaga over Baylor, St. Mary's over Hawaii, Santa Clara over UCLA, and San Francisco over USC. They're exhibition games, but do these results give you any confidence that the WCC could end up being a better, more competitive league this year than originally thought? Well, I already thought the WCC was going to be a very good competitive league. I think for people who did not, maybe these results helped open their eyes a little bit, but they didn't change my mind at all. And partly because I don't take these results particularly seriously. UCLA was missing their literal entire front court. Every single player who plays in UCLA's front court this year did not play in that exhibition game against Santa Clara. Santa Clara barely beat a UCLA team who was missing multiple key pieces. So I don't take that all that seriously. St. Mary's blasting Hawaii is exactly what should have happened. No real surprise there. Zags Baylor are two evenly matched teams. Gonzaga barely won. Baylor wasn't playing their starting point guard. USF's very good, and they beat USC. That's awesome. That is great. I don't think USC was at full strength, and I just don't think that these results have changed where I was previously at with the WCC. But again, for people who were a lot lower on the conference, maybe some of these results have changed their minds. Next question here comes from Christian via Gmail. Christian says, does Chet have a chance to break the NBA rookie block shot record? Manute Bol blocked nearly 5 a game. Yeah, Chet would need to block 5.03 shots per game in the next 76 games. He could not miss a single game. He would have to average 5 blocks a game. Nope, it's not going to happen. That record may never be broken. That is an absolute ridiculous amount of block shots. Chet's going to be great. He has already been great. He's not going to block 5 shots a game. It's not going to happen. Next question here comes from Zag Nutty on Discord, who says, if all the current 11 Zags in the NBA were on the same Gonzaga team, what's the lineup? Who starts? And how do the minutes shake out? Yeah, kind of going to speed through this a little bit. Very difficult to project. My starting lineup for the Zags in the NBA, if they were on a college roster, would be Chet at the 5, playing 25 minutes a night. Sabonis at the 4, playing 30. Kispert at the 3, playing 25. Suggs at the 2, playing 32. And then Nembhard at the point guard, playing 34, because there's not a lot of depth behind him. Bench, I have them basically in this order in terms of playing time. Rui coming off the bench, playing about 20 minutes per game, probably splitting time at the 3, 4, maybe even at the 2. And then I have Brandon Clark and Julian Strother each played about 18 minutes per game coming off the bench. Clark is your primary backup 5. Kelly Olynyk playing about 10 minutes per game as well in kind of that a deeper bench role for the team. And then Zach Collins and Philip Petrusev at the bottom. Zach Collins is a fantastic NBA player. Really good to have him on the team that's barely playing any minutes at all, but that's how many great bigs there are in the NBA coming out of Gonzaga. And then Phil Petrusev is kind of the deep bench player for right now as he joins the Sacramento Kings and hopefully finds himself with a consistent role with them. A couple more questions here before we wrap up for today. This one comes from CapZag23 on Discord, who says, if you could rank the top 3 to 5 most underrated transfers into Gonzaga, who would they be and why? And this spawned a few people's responses on the Discord channel, and a lot of people were picking very recent transfers. And I understand that recency bias is the key, but guys who were here 3 or 4 years ago aren't usually underrated. It's guys who were here a while ago who people have kind of completely forgotten about, who I'm more likely to pick here. So the answer I'm going with is Marquise Carter. Marquise Carter is at Gonzaga from like 2009 to 2012, somewhere in that range. He was there for a couple of years. Junior college transfer, was one of the best junior college players in the entire country. It's been a while since Gonzaga dipped into the JUCO pool, but Carter was awesome. His overall numbers, if you go to his basketball reference page, aren't going to jump out, but he had some huge moments for Gonzaga in the regular season and in the tournament. The 2011 WCC tournament, Carter had 18 points against San Francisco, 11 versus St. Mary's, and then in the first round of the NCAA tournament against St. John's, Marquise Carter had 24. Huge game for Carter, helped Gonzaga advance to the second round of the NCAA tournament. He showed up when they really needed him to, and is a guy that has kind of been forgotten into history for Gonzaga. Drew Barham is another one. Barham came off the bench for that really awesome 2012-13 Gonzaga team that, of course, was the first Gonzaga team to ever be ranked number 1 in the country. Again, numbers didn't shine, but as a stretch 4 coming off the bench, energy guy, grabbing a lot of boards, hitting a lot of threes, he was really valuable. And then I'm going to go with Byron Wesley. Wesley was kind of the first great Zag grad transfer. You know, the tradition that's continued with Jordan Matthews, that's continued with Rasir Bolton and Malachi Smith more recently. Gino Crandall fits in there as well. Like, they've had quite a few of these fantastic graduate transfer players. Byron Wesley came over from USC, and he was awesome. 20 points in a non-conference game versus Washington State. Huge game in the WC's tournament against Pepperdine. Played well in the NCAA tournament. Helped Gonzaga get all the way to that Elite 8 matchup in 2015. Really talented graduate transfer who, again, doesn't seem to get brought up in a lot of those transfer conversations when talking about the Zags. Final question of the show comes from Jeff via Gmail. Jeff says, how about Gonzaga winning 3 WCC conference conference titles this week, with titles in women's soccer and men's cross country and the individual title in women's cross country? Pretty awesome. It sure is. It is a great day to be a Zag. Fantastic showing from the fall sports this season. Very excited to see how those winter sports do with men's and women's basketball coming up on deck. That's going to wrap us up for today. Thank you so much for making Locked On Zags your first listen or your first watch of the day. Shout out those everyday listeners checking out the show on YouTube. We're going to have a couple more player previews as we wrap up that portion of the offseason. We'll talk Jun Sak-Yo. We'll talk Braden Huff. We'll preview Yale, talk about what I'll be looking for in that season opener. It's going to be a fantastic week, folks. We're just a couple days away from real Gonzaga basketball being played. Once again, join the Discord channel if you have not done so yet. We're talking all things Gonzaga 24/7 on that in that channel, so definitely check it out if you have not done so yet. Thank you so much for listening, and until next time, as always, go Zags.